Okay, ladies, gentlemen, there we go. There we go for the last time today during this AI summit here at this trip of the high-tech campus. Oh, I'm so glad to see that you're still with so many. That really is a great achievement. And I know that you are with us via the online stream still, also in great numbers. So thank you so very much for still staying connected with us here in Eindhoven. And of course you are still here, I would imagine, because we have our final keynote address given by Yaya Balou. And you saw her announced in the program, and for sure that you are curious to find out what she will bring up if the title of her speech will be Security at the Speed of Innovation, a recipe for a more secure future. Because we will take just one step a little bit aside from the artificial intelligence and let's dive into the world of security. Where do we stand? What is at stake over there? And then if you want to talk about that subject, then of course you end up with Yaya Balou, cybersecurity expert, Chief Information Security Officer at Avast Security. So I'll give you the floor, your final keynote. It's wonderful to have you here. Give her a nice introduction applause.
Going to race today because I understand that you've already been here from 9:30 in the morning, right? Everybody had plenty of coffee now? All right. We're going to make this as interactive as possible so I don't bore the crap out of you. Because this is not an AI talk. We're talking about cybersecurity. And the reason we're talking about cybersecurity, it's really simple. I'm hoping that you will not fuck it up as much as we have. To be blunt, it's really, really awful. Why cannot we fix this? Well, it's really simple, because we keep innovating. We keep building new things. Cybersecurity isn't catching up. Very often because it simply hasn't been included. Bottom line, no matter how we innovate, there is no security that is structurally built into our solutions. And then we wind up complaining about these things and then having exorbitant budgets to try to fix them instead of building them properly in the first place. So I just want to give you an example about how broken it is. I spent the last 2 days in collective freakout with my team, waiting for vulnerability information about OpenSSL. You guys know what SSL is? SSL, TLS, the little HTTPS, that little lock thing. Okay, cool. So we're waiting for this vulnerability to drop. And why? Because 5 days before that, we had gotten information that there was going to be a new patch. That was really nice. Someone said, hey, we're not going to ruin Halloween like we ruined Christmas last year with Log4j, which was another vulnerability that dropped. And the way that these vulnerabilities dropped is something that I want to talk about, because this was a very kind example. They announced it. They told us that we were going to suffer. We could plan our suffering to a day. And then finally, when it dropped, there was a downgrade of the severity. So instead of us all running around like chickens with our heads cut off, which we already planned to do, we could at least say, okay, these are the areas that are potentially impacted. We're going to plan to run around. And then we said, oh, we don't really need to run. We could just sprint every once in a while and we'll be okay. And that was pretty cool. We still need to fix stuff, but it was much better coordinated. And the reason that we freak out is because of this graph. So what you're looking at is how long, when such a vulnerability drop, does an attacker actually have time to take use of it? How long? So this is according to FireEye, which is one of our competitors, but they put up a useful analysis. And what they said is, look, when we have vulnerabilities and they're dropped with no information, we see roughly 58% of those vulnerabilities drop with no information, even to the maker of the thing. That's what gets exploited. And then we have 42% which still get exploited when they're dropped after a patch. Why? So there's a patch coming out, and there's still 42% that get exploited. Any idea why? Not just because they don't do the patch. Of course they don't do the patch. How many of you patched OpenSSL last night? That's my point, all right? not everyone is patching. We're not all patching. There's tons of instances. OpenSSL runs, by the way, in our own environment as a security software company. The largest portion of OpenSSL vulnerable systems were endpoints. Okay, so endpoints rarely get patched in time, especially when you give developers whatever admin access. They just don't get patched, especially when they're dependencies. So the clue here is these were not because people just didn't patch. It's because attackers hang out, wait for a major system to bring a patch, and then they try to figure out, what did you fix? Between version 3.06 and 3.07, what's changed here? And when they figure that out, okay, and here you have this idea of those things that are patched, and I wonder if the pointer works, 12% were exploited within 1 week of patch issuance, 12% of these vulnerabilities, okay? And then 15% were exploited between a week and a month. So that the guys, the attackers, are sitting there waiting for the patches to drop. They try to figure out what's the difference that was resulting in this patch. Ha-ha, that's the vulnerable exploit code that I can use to attack these non-patched systems. And then they scan the internet, find the vulnerable machines, and then run their exploits. And bing, you're in. So you got to understand that this is the speed at which we are not doing a great job in security. And this speed is actually accelerating very, very scarily. Because here we're talking about 1 week or 1 month, but in reality, where we are right now in 2022 is hours. Hours and days, not weeks and months. Hours and days before we're seeing exploits in the wild. So one example of that, and I just want to tell you, I'm actually really proud of the team. We're currently on, we're trending on the top 10 known vulnerabilities list. Some of you might have seen, does anybody use Chrome in this room? Okay, did anybody patch Chrome like really recently, like this week? You know why you did that? Because we found a vulnerability that was being exploited in the wild. We told the Chrome team, Maddie Stone and her folks, and then they fixed it. This is a major vulnerability. We saw it running in the wild, being used as an exploit by a state-sponsored attacker. I'm not going to tell you who and what because we're not ready to go public with this, but it's super scary. So what we did in order to reduce this, to kill this phenomenon, we told Chrome right away. And of course there's people now reversing the patch. Of course there's people doing the same thing that I just told you that they're going to do to try to figure it out. Because bottom line, and this is something I use in all of my presentations because I feel like we forget who's doing what, hackers are still going to hack. No matter what we do to try to fix it, there's no such thing. They hack for 3 reasons: fun, profit, and politics, usually in that order. When you take a look at their tooling, though, it goes in reverse. We find that the tools that are used by the advanced attackers, okay, the super dedicated, highly funded, very determined, motivated attackers wind up in the hands of the 15-year-old down the street who's really irritating and just wants to hack his neighbors in his school. Okay, he winds up using these super sophisticated attack tools. And like the cyber criminal there, you know, they're also just making sure that that market is available and effective. So it becomes very difficult for defenders to figure out who did the attack. Again, there's some lessons learned here, because I want to talk about a recent attack that only happened about a month ago. Anybody ever use Uber? Okay, good mobile population, right? Okay, you use Uber, I know that, Carlo. The clue is, you know, I want to talk about the hack that happened at Uber, and I want you to see, is there any lessons learned here for your own organization? So you might have seen the first bit of news, right? Hey, Uber is investigating a breach, and they're really worried about it, and what you might have then subsequently seen is how they actually found out. I don't know if you can read this, so I'm just going to tell you what happened. The attacker announced himself on Slack, on the internal company Slack. He basically said, hey, how's everybody? Just want to let you know, I announced that I am a hacker and Uber has suffered a data breach. Slack has been stolen. Confidential data with Confluent Stash and 2 monorepos from Fabricator have been stolen, along with secrets from sneakers. And then it says, Uber underpays drivers. And then what you see, the emojis underneath, are thanks to employees going like, woohoo! So, and this sounds like cuckoo, but it totally fits. And then you got other information saying, this is just the tip of the iceberg, this. Because what happened then is someone managed to engage this attacker on another messaging site and managed to say, all right, so how'd you do it? You know, how'd you get in? Well, there was a PowerShell script, and it actually had the password on a PowerShell script for the admin user, so the root user, in their privileged access management system, where all the passwords are for all the root users and all the systems. Sounds like a good architecture idea. What do you think? All eggs, one basket? What could possibly go wrong? Right. So, and then, you know, he wanted to know where'd you get it, and Uber Internet, so corporate, how'd you get access? Did you social engineer an employee, access the VPN, scan the internet? Yes. One employee. All right? So let's talk about how that worked for a second, too. That might be me. That might be them yelling at me to take off my earring, which I said no to, and I didn't, so let's not do that. Okay, so, you know, the internet immediately, of course, rushed to the assistance of Uber. It did what the internet does best. What's that? It made memes. Yes. So it helped out with all the memes, and we started unraveling how it actually happened, and we found out that the attacker here, who wanted to brag and get bragging rights on Slack and then chat about how he did this awesome hack, actually was a teenage kid. It was the member of Lapsus, and Lapsus is known for hacking like, you know, a whole bunch of different people, from Microsoft to Okta to Rockstar Games, Brazilian Ministry of Health. So they hacked all these people. They got arrested. How old do you think the ringleader of Lapsus, this super sophisticated gang that hacked all of this stuff, is? Well, this guy, the ringleader. It's a trick question, guys. I know you can read. Come on. 10. Who's the 10-year-old? I'm going to hire that 10-year-old. Pay them very little. Just give them cookies. They'll be fine. So, no, guys, he was 15 years old. But I like the way you think. So the clue is, how did that social engineering of that single employee work? We're building these massively complex ecosystem. How did we social engineer the employee? All right, no ideas? Let me just tell you. What they did, first of all, who uses more than one laptop in this room? Yes, thank you. All right, so what happened? This employee did the same thing. He logged into Uber because, you know, Uber has a large network. They employ a lot of people. They have people who also, like this room, have more than one device. He logged into Uber, his corporate network, from his other device. That can happen. Uber does do something with two-factor authentication, right? Yeah, so basically, the way that this works, user has two devices. One device gets compromised. Yeah, just because it's a regular device, he doesn't have antivirus, he doesn't do all the protections, but he still accesses Uber on that device. On that device, he still uses all these other credentials. There were credentials there that were compromised and put away. The attacker starts looking for employees at Uber. He scours social media profiles, LinkedIn profiles, figures out where people work, then tries to look for deliberately dropped credentials on the dark web. Right? He finds them. He finds them to a whole bunch of Uber employees. He finds a bunch of dark web credentials. Then he tries those credentials. He manages to get into a couple of employees' accounts. Once he's gotten in, he tries to wonder, can I maybe reuse their dropped credentials on the dark web with the same credentials that they would use to access Uber? Because why? Humans are lazy. We use the same passwords everywhere because we're numbnuts. So what do? They access the VPN. The VPN issues a two-factor authentication token, but the token looks like yes or no. So when a user gets brute forced with lots of requests to log in, one user clicked yes. The attacker's in. Then he was able to do exactly what he said he did, which is scan the corporate internet, figure out where to go, hack the privileged access management thing. He's in all the way. Now, I want you to imagine your own company. How likely would this be to happen? Would this work? Does anyone say that this would work? Thank you, because I'm telling you, I work for a security vendor, this would work. So part of the reason that this would work, and this works with all of us, is because we've made a mess. We have created complexity, which we can no longer unravel with the same thinking that we used to create it in the first place. We made a services mess, we made a protocol zoo on top of it, and we did this because the underlying foundational protocols that pretty much determine, SS7 is there for mobile networks, BGP is there for all the internet, they're from 1970 something. Okay, I think SS7 is 1976. And by the way, I am also a product of the 70s, nothing bad about the 70s, but maybe not good to build our entire advanced current civilization on the back of this stuff. Maybe we need new protocols, and it's really hard to get rid of this. And all of this is making it possible to create vulnerabilities across other systems that are splinter new or spanking new, and they're terribly, terribly outdated because of these underlying vulnerabilities. So continuously building new technologies on top of old vulnerabilities, it's what's causing us to have a sort of war games in real life. Let me see if this works. There we go. There's my animation. So if any of you ever have watched the movie War Games, great. You might recognize the map that's up there. It's a digital attack map, except this is one I lifted last night. Looking at the global DDoS activity. So DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Service Attacks. It's pretty much the stupidest attack that anyone can launch. It requires zero sophistication. All right, so I'm going to teach you all to do one right now, just because. So the first thing you do is you go to Google and you type the words booter or stressor. That's it. You type the words booter or stressor, you get a list. You can do it on your mobile phones now if you're getting bored. So type booter or stressor, and you'll get a bunch of services. And what you'll then see is you'll pick one of the services. I just picked one for you. You'll see that they have attractive pricing plans starting from $2.99 all the way up to an enterprise license of $2,000. But the cool thing is the enterprise license will give you unlimited attacks per day with an attack power of 225 gigabits per second. Not bad. We can take down Greece with that, okay? Just to be clear, the internet exchange of Greece, where all of the internet traffic for the entire country does, is nowhere near 225 gigabits per second. How complex is this? By the way, even if you don't even sign up for one of these plans with Bitcoin, even if you don't do that, you should know the first 15 minutes are free. It's because they understand consumer buying behavior and they know how to make sure that you get attracted to go into these things. How do we prevent the stuff that you guys are working on from turning into this nightmare? How do we prevent this from happening? Because commoditization and democratization of technology is pretty much behind everything we built for innovation. How do we prevent this nightmare from happening? Because you should know that fundamentally this has always been about the money. It never has changed. It's always like all the innovation we do, of course, yeah, betterment of society, yada, yada, I get it, but it's about the money. What you should know right now is that cybercrime is one of the largest economies in the planet. Cybercrime is the largest economy, or one of the largest economies on the planet. And in terms of bad economies and what you can do with it, it's bigger right now than the entire global drug trade. Okay, all the drug trades and money mules and everything else in the world, still smaller than the amount of money you can make with cybercrime. And cybercrime is way more attractive because you can do it in the attractiveness of your own work from home situation, right? It allows a great degree of anonymity and covert behavior, and you get to play with cool stuff and hang out with like really interesting people. So I would say switch careers. And if you take a look at the cost to an enterprise, those costs are also sucking big time because it takes more and more money for the defenders to defend. COVID has not helped out at all. And actually what we've seen is, as people have gone to this work from home, use multiple devices situation, it's actually increased the cost of every data breach. So not just the overall cost to defend, but per breached thing. And you should know ransomware, by the way, on the cybercrime bucket list of what should we do, every year Europol in The Hague, hangs out with its fellow police partners, not across Europe only, but also with the FBI and Interpol, and they all hang out and they talk about what's going on with cybercrime. Number one, trending like almost now 4 years in a row, it's going to be there again, by the way, for this year's IOCTA report, the Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment, IOCTA, they're going to say again that ransomware is the biggest cybercrime threat that we're all facing. It's so easy because of the fact, just like DDoS, which you can buy as a service and requires zero sophistication to do, you too can mix with the wonderful world of ransomware by joining an affiliate program. Yeah? You can go online, get someone else's ransomware toolkit, sign up, and part of the proceeds belong to you. As long as you don't have an issue of hacking someone's grandmother, you're cool. And this really happens. In fact, it's getting so popular that last night, for those of you that watched Lubach, last night on Dutch television, the topic for Lubach was ransomware. That's how bad it is. Lubach is talking about it. All right? So, and you might wonder, who is the ransomware god? Well, his name is Kim, and I'm not kidding. And the reason that I think he's like the ultimate OG gangsta of ransomware is because of the fact that he's made more money than everyone else doing this, setting up his affiliate program, franchises, his whole enterprise. And this with one internet connection, that's innovation for you. All right? So he's managed to get his people mobilized, engaged, and the UN report, back already 2 years old now, has said that he netted anywhere between $2 to $3 billion 2 years ago. All right, $2 to $3 billion with ransomware programs. And he's using it to finance his nuclear weapons program in North Korea, which with his bromance with Trump was not fully dismantled. Yeah. And you should know that just this year, in 2022, the first 6 months, there's an estimation of 450 million. Just the first 6 months is the current estimation with the ODC. So it's not just Kim. There's a whole swath of criminally professional folks who are also doing this for a living, and they're recruiting. They're recruiting engineers. They also have people who are good with, communications and other humans. You too could have a career there, with call centers and service engineers. They also want to help you figure out, how do you pay with Bitcoin if you've never used Bitcoin before? So they'll help you set everything up and put you along your way. You should know that they're almost more professional than a lot of, tech companies. They have bug bounty programs. They try to find their own vulnerabilities. They make sure that they're ready to go. They have security skills. They are sometimes, like in the state of the Russian ransomware gangs, they're state-sponsored. But if they're not state-sponsored, they're just state-protected. So the state will not pick them up. Even though there was a meeting between Biden and Putin to try to figure it out, you should know that these gangs are still ultimately political. And there's a really interesting case. If you're bored and you just want to giggle in the evening, one of these ransomware gangs, Conti, they got hacked from the inside out. One of their members suddenly had a woke ethical moment during the beginning of the Ukrainian conflict, because Conti came out and then basically announced, actually I don't have that in this slide, but Conti came out and announced that they were pro-Putin. And all the members within the affiliate program said, we're not all pro-Putin, this is an international gang, we're not pro-Putin. And so then suddenly, what wound up happening is they did something called the Conti leaks. They dumped all the information of Conti. One of the pieces of information was dumped was their primary Bitcoin wallet. So that primary Bitcoin wallet in dollars, can someone read this number, please? Again, guys, this is a company, construction, with around 35 individuals we are estimating as a group. 35 individuals are sharing 2.7 trillion? Yeah. So how much did you make last year? Crime does pay. It's just, you might want to question your life choices. I know what happened. It's up here. So this is what happened. So Conti, pro-Russia, and then, the guy that did the leak, here's a friendly heads up that the Conti gang just lost all their shit. Yeah, that's the sort of message from the guy who dumped everything online, and then you again have this Bitcoin address there. So I want to talk to you about what you do in case this happens. It's not just enough to tell you that everything is broken. I want to tell you how to fix it. First thing, don't pay. Please don't pay. Notify law enforcement. Please don't pay. You should know also that there are ways to prevent this by fixing the vulnerabilities. When they drop, when there are patches out, you fix them. That you make sure you know what it is you're protecting and from whom, and you make sure you have your cybersecurity sorted. The other stupid thing you can do, unfortunately, is get cybersecurity insurance. Not just make backups, not just update your stuff, but you can also get insurance. And right now, most of the gangs are targeting companies who have insurance because they see it as a victimless crime. So what they do is they first attack the insurer, whose cybersecurity is pretty weak. Then they found out who the customers are, yeah, and how much they're able to, I'm not joking, I wish I was joking. I wish I was joking. What their ability to pay is, and then when they're doing the negotiations, whether it's 5 million or 10 million, you know, and the insurance, the company's like, oh, poor us, and they were like, dude, we know you're insured, this is what your insurance policy looks like, and then they wind up paying anyway. Because even when you pay, there's no honor amongst thieves. They might still dump your data. And this, like before I was joining this session, I was just reading through yet another attack, yet another we're gonna leak. You know, if it's not Conti, the current flavor of the month is Lockbit, the Lockbit ransomware gang. We also have REvil. It's exhausting. So when you look at what's up and why that actually makes a difference, it's because these gangs are not just annoying, they actually play with the building blocks of cyber weapons. And those weapons, we saw, this slide is slightly redacted because it comes from one of our internal systems, which looks at campaigns. And you might recognize the little country here in question that's in red. It's Ukraine. So one of the campaigns that we detected is like a very high spiked increase in a particular type of malware that's there to go ahead and like break all the other stuff that's there. And we're continuously detecting these kinds of threats in Ukraine. And we don't just do it in Ukraine. I mean, we obviously do it in other places, which is why we found the Chrome vulnerability that we talked about in the beginning. But it's really bad because the difference between ransomware that just locks your files, the wiper malware actually kills your master boot record and your file system. So it's impossible to do anything anymore. Its only objective is to be destructive so that you cannot get back up no matter what you do. There is no other way. And like, this is a real worry. We saw the advent of several wipers. We know that we cannot completely defeat them, but we also see like all types of availability campaigns that are targeting Ukraine, including things like kill the telecommunications infrastructure, the energy plants are being under threat, the gas, I mean, it's just, even though we thought it was going to be even worse, it's still bad. It's not the Armageddon that I have to tell you that everyone in my community thought like, oh my God, it's going to be amazing in the sense of sheer raw damage, and it wasn't. The Russian hackers did not do that thing that we thought they were going to do, but what we did see is still pretty bad. And that being said, you know, there are things, again, here we can do, because that wiper malware also has a ransomware variant. And what we try to do, together with other folks, especially with the European police and with the high-tech crime units, et cetera, from different countries, we try to figure out how, for the ransomware, we can find decryptors. And then we put it on a site. If you don't know this, I'd love you to write this down, called nomoreransom.org. If you ever know someone that gets affected, first check nomoreransom.org. It might have the decryption key and save your butt so you never have to pay. This problem will be a problem for the next decade. And the reason is because we are all using the same stuff everywhere. You might have heard us talk about supply chains in relation to the fact that we can't get chips out of China, or we're worried about certain raw materials, but it's also really relevant when we look at hardware and software supply chains for cybersecurity. We've been exploiting supply chains for decades. We know this is a problem. But we still haven't managed to figure out an easy way to inventorize how our dependencies for our upstream and downstream supply chains actually work. Who's using our stuff, and whose stuff are we using, and how much does that expose us? And the biggest reason that we don't do that is because probably half of the stuff that we use is being maintained by one guy living in his mom's basement in Ohio that's like foundationally supporting the rest of the internet, and that's the truth. So we don't always know, and then we cannot always fix, which is why we haven't attacked it before, but we have to do it now. And it's only because of all of these 0 days. It's because of all of the attacks that we're seeing that are being not only exploited, found, but sold. And they're being sold on a black and a white market. Both, like, our national governments want to have offensive operations by these 0 days. It just basically means a tactical advantage. And when you see who's doing the buying and selling, we see, like, groups like this guy from Italy who just will sell to the FBI, to the Israeli government, to whomever, to the Saudis. You know, the Khashoggi case is a great example of this group's activity being used there. If you remember the Apple case with San Bernardino, right? I see you nodding. But so Apple was asked to surrender their code signing keys, which would pretty much make every single iPhone across the planet vulnerable. So as an answer to that, what they did, does anybody know what they did? They bought a 0 day. They bought one of these vulnerabilities from an Israeli company, Cellbrite, for roughly about $1 million. So they knew they could do this. That's what they finally wound up doing. And they work with groups, like even the authorities, with NSO groups, etc. But these groups, unfortunately, are just mercenaries. They don't care who they sell to as long as they get paid. And it becomes a real problem because we wind up having offensive operations from governments, sometimes buying mercenary goods, to then subsequently attack each other. We saw this when the Americans and the Russians were attacking each other, and they had these different code names. One was basically the Equation Group, which was an outfit set up by the NSA, which was subsequently attacked by another group called the Shadow Brokers, coming out of Russia. And if you, again, have time, go to the Twitter page of Shadow Brokers. It's really entertaining. It's broken Russian, where they tell you how they're basically finding stuff, supposedly from the American NSA operations, to find 0 days and then subsequently putting them online. By the way, remember we talked about that, trickle-down effect? The war between, this Cold War, if you will, between the Russians and the Americans on this actually resulted in something that you may know. Does anyone remember WannaCry? Yeah? That was a direct result of the NSA trying to find 0 days, the Russians taking it, having it stolen, putting some of it online, and subsequently, we think, the North Koreans finding it and then rummaging through it to get exploitation globally until it was stopped. It's really terrifying how interconnected these things are, and if we don't pay attention, we may not notice it's even happening. You might have heard of the Pegasus malware, which is also there really to target journalists, but also presidents and prime ministers, and really like an advanced toolkit to target those super especially difficult to find and attack actors. There's one way to defeat that as well. There's a mobile verification toolkit that you can download and use that was provided by courtesy of Citizen Lab. If you're ever worried about this kind of stuff, or you're working on really interesting intellectual property, you do need to think about all of the things I just talked about. And that's why I think this is also specifically for you. I think we sometimes tend to underestimate who is after our stuff. We don't all need to be prime ministers for someone to be actually targeting us from an IP perspective. And you should know that these war games and the way that we're playing them in 2022 is really different. And the Ukrainian situation provides us an excellent case in point. We see tons of pressure on all kinds of critical infrastructure. Even when it's not outright cyber war, we still see it. But what we do need to think about better, especially in this room, is like, how do we first protect ourselves before we think about anything offensive? So forget the offensive operations. Let's just start with getting the basics right. Make sure that we do things like our standards, like our supply chain, and then make sure we test. Find ways to do really rapid failures, because this whole thing, everything I've presented so far, is about information security failures. How can we learn from them and improve and iterate the next time? And know this, there's some rando kid in the basement of his mom's house hacking Russia as we speak. The participatory nature of everything I showed you means that anyone can play. They don't just play DDoSing their school, they're DDoSing Russia. That means we have a new phase of our civilization where we see combatants in war that are just private individuals that can play war whenever they want. And we're actually seeing this evidenced when we look at these attacks. It means that we need to rethink what it is that we actually have at stake and who's playing. Also, finally, dudes, data breaches. It's so annoying, but like every day there's yet another one. I'm exhausted of the data breaches. Everyone who says data is the new oil, and I know in the AI community, I've talked to a lot of AI folks who work at Avast, data is like a big deal, I get it. But if we say that, then we really need to have a better way to protect that data, because these oil spills, when there's a data breach, if data is new oil, then oil spills are like exhausting because they are all over the internet, they're continuously exposed, and we cannot clean them up fast enough. And when you take a look at the statistics by days, we're seeing that like they don't know when the breach occurred. Most average is 287 days. So there's been a breach, and it takes an organization 287 days to figure out that it happened in the first place. That's insane. So we need to get way better. We need to figure out how we get better security by not just doing good cryptography or encrypting all the data. That's nice, very pretty. We should definitely do encryption. I'm not disagreeing. But we need to get all of the other stuff right too, because no attacker is going to attack the encryption layer if they can attack your weak-ass protocols and the non-existent patches that you haven't applied on all of your hardware, software, application, etc. So we need to think about this and then still remember what it is we have to protect and from whom. Because if you have some really serious intellectual property or you've done a better job at protein folding than AlphaFold, cool, but you need to do a better job of protecting that IP. So make sure that you know your stuff, you are seeing everything that you possibly can, and that you are able to act as quickly as possible. So really, awareness, visibility, and risk intel, and security capability. And in closing, we all can get this right. We need to be able to do a better job by getting the basics of hygiene done well. And what I don't want to leave you with today is a false sense of insecurity. I don't want to terrify the crap out of you. But at the same time, I prefer that you don't have a false sense of security either. So in the words of Buzz Luhrmann, no matter what else you do, don't forget the sunscreen. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, you wanted to terrify the crap out of us. Oh. I think you succeeded. How are you doing? Oh, how do you feel? Did it terrify? Mission completed, yeah? You terrified us. That's exactly what you wanted to do. This is the recipe you gave us. Let's try to learn when it comes to AI from the failures. It was very open and insightful to share with us what happens in the security domain. It is amazing. Yeah, thank you so very much. Is there anybody who wants to give a reaction, a reflection, a question? Or are you? Yes, great. Yeah, you have the microphone with you.
Thank you very much. I'm Angelique Staal from the Cyber Resilience Center Brainport. And we are a community of high-tech industry and to help each other with the cyber resilience. And my question is, we're talking about IA today. What are the new threats who are coming to us with developing IA? And what can we do against that?
I love your question because I get asked this all the time. I love this question. So the question was about, how many AI threats are there today? What are the threats specifically to AI? So I have to tell you, first of all, I have not seen a single AI-powered cyber attack with the exception of domain-generating algorithms. It's the only exception. And domain-generating algorithms are basically, so you have to imagine, we have several indicators of compromise, when something bad happens. And we look at something like specific, like an IP address or a server name or some host name. And then we have something else that is less specific. And the specific stuff tends to be like temporal, things, so that as a result of which we lose its accuracy over time. But we also look at something else called TTPs, or tools, tactics, and procedures. And those are more persistent. We can look at tools, tactics, and procedures over a longer time. No AI stuff. The only thing is keep on popping up another domain so that we are not fast enough at killing the bad domain where the stuff is coming from, or where the attack is going to. So that's the only thing. However, that being said, does anybody know about the DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge? Okay, so I believe that in your field it's something like adversarial machine learning, right? So the idea is the DARPA Grand Challenge basically tried to create two systems that were trying to play war. One defends, the other attacks. And during that challenge, the greatest kind of outcome of that was fuzzing tooling. So basically trying to find new ways of attack by looking for every possible permutation that could exist when applying input to the software that was there doing the defense. And I do think that that's really interesting, but I don't think that that's everything. What was found during that challenge was a couple of new novel attack methods, but no new defense things. So I think if we were better at applying adversarial machine learning from a preemptive perspective, we would be a lot better off. So as a testing methodology, for example. I do think that there's a lot, so I talk a lot to the AI guys at Avast, and I do think there's a lot of benefits of some of the things that you can do with different AI techniques on cybersecurity. So there's a positive impact that can be had. I'm just not seeing at the moment the democratization of some of that AI stuff for doing all kinds of evil to us.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your question also. It's good. Wonderful. Yeah? Okay, well, we have some food for thought here. Thank you so very much once more. And then, Carlo, I think we're going to close this AI summit. We have been working, we started at 9:30 this morning, at 9 for the first coffee, and now it's almost
it was a long day. It was a long day.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, at least. I hope the rest of you also have a little bit of energy left after all this. So you're ready for the drinks. So I'm just here to keep you off the drinks for a few more minutes. I won't make it too late. It was a long day. So yes, in the beginning we also said about this metaphors that every technology has his dark side. That we said the metaphor of the bricks and also fire. We invented how to control fire, so that we at least could cook food and keep ourselves warm and survive the winter. But we could also burn our houses or burn your fingers with it. So that's always the negative side. So we did all kind of fire protection measures and technologies, and we regulated the stuff. Now, the thing is, and that's why we got this warning very quietly with this powerful technology of AI, with the metaphor of the fire, you don't want other people to control your fire, especially if they want to do damage to you, and can take you hostage with that one. So with this very powerful technology of AI, we should be very careful. So I was asked to give you a little bit of feedback of everything that happens in all the tracks.
Please do so, yes.
Yeah, the thing is that I didn't visit all tracks. That was a little bit kind of impossible.
No, you were with the research track.
I got a little bit of the things back. So yeah, we did the research here, which was quite positive. I'll end with that one. But in the expert sessions, I got some feedback that I think actually the ethical and legal expert track was the most dynamic. And awfully we think, oh, this boring stuff of ethical and legal is just a prerequisite. On the contrary, the techies now also start knowing that this is very important and a dynamic thing, and it's all, and also the other tracks over there were all about trust, which is so important. If people don't trust the stuff and the AI or do not understand it, they're also not going to embrace it and not use it. So that was a feedback that I got from there that landed quite well. We also had the adoption track. Yeah. And in the adoption, it was just, there were also some efforts trying to get, how to adopt all this thing that's happening with AI and data. How, as a company, should you start with this one? And there are some steps over there, and they did some sessions on how this works in practice. Actually, just as a tip, I got that there's a scan made by the province. It's called the Data Kansen Scan. At least 2 out of the 3 words are English. So it's the Data Kansen Scan, and they even offer coaches to help companies with that one. That's an interesting tip. If you Google a little bit on Data Kansen Scan in the province of Noord-Brabant, you should end up there. If not, they have to do some homework. I haven't got any feedback on the startups, but I know how this went. This is always dynamic, if you see the startups that we at the university create, also coming from these student teams, you know all these young companies that already employ thousands of people already after a couple of years. That's incredible. But what we now feel is all the ideas and the startups that we create at the university, half of them are data or AI related. It's something that's really popping up. And I'm really curious that in a couple of years, just looking back of what all happens here and been discussed in the startups, what kind of companies they created. Now, we were here at the research track, and maybe just to mention one thing, what struck me there. And the thing is that we had here people from companies together with people from research from the university, and in 2 occasions they said from okay this, and we talked about it over coffee, and then we got the idea too. So that's the thing. We were very productive the last 2 years where we could work at home, but the creativity needs people to just talk over coffee and then an idea. Oh, let's try that. They always been born therefore I'm going to even talk a little bit faster that you can go there. It's not only coffee; it also works at beer or even better. So let's try that over there. One thing that I also invited during the research tracks is that these kind of things where we present what we're doing at the university. There are about 300 research staff people working at least partly on AI, and about 500 by now already PhDs that do their work at least partly on AI. And we invite them every now and then at what we called research cafes. We are building a new lab in the middle of our campus, and it's going to open probably in around February. And soon after that we will start doing our research cafes again. If you're not automatically invited to us, contact us and you will be on an invitation list where we have about 8, 9, 10 PhDs doing a 5-minute pitch, 5-minute Q&A, so it only takes 10 minutes if it's very boring piece before you get something more interesting. That's the thing, we do that 8, 9 times, and after that it's free bitterballen and beer, and that's where we start generating these new procedures. So that's just an invitation on that one. Okay, leaves me with just thank you again that you all came here. Amongst all these other events, we were with more than 350 people here. There were, and we checked this, a very constant number of people between 150 and 200 also following us online. So that's a total of more than 500 people that were there a day, amongst all these other things that are happening in the world. So apparently there's something going on here. Please also, you will be asked to also do some review and evaluate what happened today. We're open for criticism, how to make it even better, so please fill that in. And then hopefully also to see you back next year. Before we're going to end, and I'll try to give you some comfort with all these scary things, I just want to thank it's not only EAISI with this, together with the AI Innovation Center here at Brainport, with the AI Hub of Brainport, and with the province of Brabant. So thank you, Jacqueline, Paul, Wendy, Floor, Rebecca, Sasha, and Patricia, and I hope I don't miss anyone. So give them a round of applause because they're all the organization. And really appreciate it. And thanks, Simone, as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Carlo. This is, we will meet up next year, a
We'll
new
probably-
AI summit.
Yeah, so shall we do it again next year then, or yeah?
Okay,
We might.
great.
We might think about a little bit bigger occasion. No, maybe let's try to fit it in here. We keep it exclusive, that's also a possibility. Okay, so we scared you a little bit maybe in the end, and we scared you a little bit in the beginning when we saw this metaverse future. But on this one, I give you just a last comforting thought that we can always take a sidestep to this simulated universe. You know, this AI is going to be so good already, what we expected in maybe 10, 20 years, then it's good enough to constantly fool us that we're in a simulated universe, and not with an Oculus or something, but just directly into your nerves. All your 6, 7, 5 senses, whatever, will be simulated. And then actually, when this is possible in 20 years, then some people might think, oh, why step out of this simulated world? Everything is perfect here. And so for the rest of the existence of the universe, which is about 5 billion years, we will be positioned in that situation. Now, in 20 years, they probably put it back in this era because, you know, we're kind of nostalgic animals, and they say, okay, let's put it back 20 years. So it's around this time when we still could eat meat, and there was still some heating, and the climate was ready. And put a sunny day, you know.
Carlo, let's have a true drink.
A sunny day in November. Now here's the thing. So either this is real, either this is happening now, or we are somewhere in this 5 billion years. So the chance that this is real is just 1 on 500 million. Having said that apparently in this simulation, they ended up in the midst of Brainport on a sunny day in November. So apparently this is the best that the simulator people could get from. The only thing that is missing, that having a drink to discuss the possibility of this scenario. So see you at the drinks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Great done.